It was 11:47 p.m. when the black SUV rolled into the parking garage. The men who stepped out weren't normal. Marcus Henderson, the parking attendant, noticed immediately. But the customers thought he was just an old man in a uniform. That was their biggest mistake. Welcome to the human stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of hidden protection and deadly precision, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories of quiet guardians need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who protect from the shadows. The Meridian Tower Parking Garage was the kind of place where money spoke louder than words. 17. Floors of concrete and steel housing vehicles worth more than most people's homes. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and the occasional Rolls-Royce filled the premium spots, while their owners conducted business in the tower above. Marcus Henderson had worked the night shift there for 4 years. 62 years old, wearing the same navy blue uniform every night, with silver hair kept military short and a face that told stories he'd never share. To the wealthy clientele who frequented the garage, he was invisible, just another piece of the infrastructure, like the security cameras or the ticket machines. They saw what they expected to see: an aging man grateful for employment, someone who'd probably worked menial jobs his entire life. They handed him their keys without making eye contact, dropped tips into his palm like they were feeding pigeons, and walked away without a second thought. What they didn't see was the way Marcus moved. How his eyes swept every entrance and exit. When new vehicles arrived, how he positioned himself to maintain sightlines to multiple levels simultaneously. How he recognized the sound of every engine, the weight of every footstep, the difference between normal conversation and hushed planning. They didn't notice that he never sat down during his shift, never listened to music, never checked his phone. They didn't realize that his seemingly random walks through the garage followed precise security patterns, or that he could recall the exact location and owner of every vehicle without consulting the computer system. Most importantly, they had no idea that Marcus Henderson wasn't really Marcus Henderson at all. His real name was Marcus Chun, though he'd legally changed it years ago when his old life became too dangerous to maintain. For 15 years, he'd been part of the Presidential Protective Division of the Secret Service, eventually working his way up to the elite counter-assault team, the last line of defense when all other security measures failed. He'd stood post outside the Oval Office. He'd traveled to hostile nations where every face in the crowd was a potential threat. He'd been in the lead car during 3 separate assassination attempts, and each time his quick thinking and faster reflexes had been the difference between a close call and a national tragedy. But that was before Sarajevo, before the operation that officially never happened, where he'd saved 2 lives and lost something inside himself that he'd never quite recovered. The medical discharge had been honorable, the pension generous, the therapy sessions mandatory. But none of it had prepared him for civilian life. For 2 years after leaving the service, Marcus had worked private security protecting CEOs, celebrities, foreign dignitaries who could afford the best. The money was excellent, but the work felt hollow. These weren't people serving their country or fighting for justice. They were just rich individuals who'd made enemies through their own poor choices. He tried teaching at a security academy, sharing his expertise with the next generation of protectors. But the bureaucracy and politics reminded him too much of why he'd left government service in the first place. The students were eager but naive, more interested in the glamour they'd seen in movies than the grinding reality of protection work. Eventually, Marcus had realized what he was looking for: a simple job where he could use his skills to protect people without the complications of politics, egos, or corporate agendas. The parking garage at Meridian Tower had seemed perfect. Quiet, routine, low profile. A place where he could fade into the background and live a peaceful life. He should have known peace wasn't in his nature. The black SUV appeared on the security monitor at 11:45 p.m. Marcus noticed it immediately, not because it was unusual to see expensive vehicles in the garage, but because of how it moved. The driver was taking his time, surveying the layout, noting camera positions and exit routes. Professional surveillance behavior, Marcus switched his attention between the monitor and the physical garage, watching as the SUV circled the first level twice before heading up the ramp. Still circling, still assessing. The vehicle had government plates, but that didn't mean anything. Legitimate federal agents would have called ahead, coordinated with building security, announced their presence. These men were operating in stealth. Dot at 11:47, the SUV finally parked on the third level, in a spot that provided quick access to both the elevator and the emergency stairwell. Two men got out, and Marcus's trained eyes immediately cataloged everything about them. The first man was tall and lean, moving with the controlled precision of someone with military training. His suit was expensive but practical, cut to conceal. A shoulder holster. He kept his hands loose at his sides, ready to draw, and his eyes never stopped moving as he scanned for threats. The second man was shorter but broader, with the kind of build that came from years of serious weight training. His jacket was slightly bulky on the left side, probably carrying a backup weapon. He was the muscle, while his partner was the brains. Both men wore earpieces, nearly invisible, but not quite. They were in communication with someone, receiving instructions or providing updates. This wasn't a spontaneous visit. It was a planned operation. Marcus felt the familiar tingle of adrenaline as his training kicked in. Years of protecting high-value targets had taught him to recognize a threat assessment when he saw one. These men weren't here to park cars or visit offices. They were here to hurt someone. The question was, who? Marcus moved with deliberate casualness, pushing his cleaning cart toward the elevator bank while keeping the two men in his peripheral vision. To any observer, he looked like a conscientious employee doing his job. In reality, he was positioning himself between the potential threats and the most likely avenue of escape. The men split up, which confirmed Marcus's suspicions. The tall one headed for the elevator, while the muscular one took position near the stairwell. They were setting up a trap, controlling the exits so their target would have nowhere to run. Marcus checked his watch, 11:52 p.m. The last scheduled arrival of the evening was supposed to be at midnight. A regular customer who always parked in the same spot on the fifth level. Margaret Chun, no relation despite the shared surname. She was a federal prosecutor who'd been handling a high-profile organized crime case, working late hours at her law firm in the tower. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. Marcus had never spoken to Margaret beyond polite pleasantries when she tipped him, but he'd made it his business to know about all the regular customers. It was basic security protocol: know who belongs and who doesn't, who has patterns and who breaks them. Margaret Chun was as predictable as clockwork, which made her an easy target for anyone who'd been watching. He could call building security, but they were just minimum wage guards with radios. He could call the police, but they'd ask too many questions and take too long to respond. By the time backup arrived, whatever was planned would already be over. That left Marcus with a choice he'd hoped he'd never have to make again: stay invisible and let someone else handle the problem, or step back into the world he'd left behind. Decision was easier than he'd expected. Marcus moved his cleaning cart to a supply closet on the second level, removing the mop bucket and retrieving something that had been hidden inside a Glock 17 in a waterproof case, along with 2 spare magazines. He'd hoped he'd never need it, but old habits died hard. A protector without backup protection was just a victim waiting to happen. He checked the weapon quickly and efficiently, muscle memory taking over. The gun was clean, loaded, and ready. He tucked it into his waistband, covered by his uniform jacket, and picked up his radio. "Central, this is Peking. I've got a suspicious vehicle on level 3, requesting a security sweep," he said calmly. The voice that came back was tired and disinterested. "Copy, Peking. What kind of suspicious activity?" 2 men, armed, setting up surveillance positions. Could be planning something for the midnight arrival. There was a pause. "Armed? Are you sure?" Marcus sighed. "I'm sure." "Send back up and call." "The police? This is real." But even as he made the call, Marcus knew help wouldn't arrive in time. Margaret Chun would be here in less than 8 minutes, and these men would be ready for her. He was going to have to handle this himself. Marcus took the service elevator to the 5th level where Margaret Chun always parked. The space was dimly lit, with concrete pillars providing plenty of cover for an ambush. Perfect for what the men had planned, but also perfect for what Marcus had in mind. He could hear them communicating through their earpieces as they repositioned themselves. They were good professional, disciplined, coordinating their movements, but they were also overconfident. They thought they were dealing with a helpless prosecutor and a harmless old parking attendant. They had no idea they were being hunted by someone who'd made a career of thinking 3 steps ahead of people trying to kill him. Marcus used the shadows and concrete pillars to move unseen, getting closer to the tall one who positioned himself near the elevator. The man was focused on the arrival point, watching for their target, not expecting trouble from behind. It was a classic mistake tunnel vision. In his Secret Service days, Marcus had seen agents make the same error. They'd get so focused on the primary threat that they forget to watch their 6. Marcus was less than 10 feet away when the man's earpiece crackled. Target ETA 3 minutes, a voice said. Final positions. The tall man adjusted his stance, hand moving inside his jacket. Marcus could see the outline of a pistol and a shoulder holster. Expensive, professional gear. These weren't street criminals or amateurs. They were contractors, probably ex-military or ex-law enforcement themselves. That made them dangerous, but it also made them predictable. Marcus had worked with men like this, knew how they thought, how they moved. He could use that knowledge against them. The sound of a car engine echoed through the garage. Margaret Chen was arriving early. Marcus moved fast, closing the distance, while the tall man was distracted by the approaching vehicle. He wrapped his arm around the man's throat in a blood choke, applying pressure to the carotid arteries while using his other hand to prevent the draw of the man's weapon. The man struggled, but Marcus had size, leverage, and experience on his side. Within seconds, the man went limp, unconscious but alive. Marcus lowered him quietly to the ground, removing his earpiece and weapon before zip-tying his hands with restraints from his cleaning supplies. Alpha, report. A voice crackled from the fallen earpiece. Marcus picked up the device and keyed the transmit button. Target acquired, he said in a low voice, hoping to buy time. Copy. Bravo moved to secondary position. Marcus pocketed the earpiece and moved toward the elevator, where Margaret Chun would emerge in less than a minute. The second man, Bravo, would be repositioning, probably to get a better angle on the target area. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 5th level. Margaret Chun stepped out, talking on her phone, completely unaware of the danger surrounding her. She was in her 40s, well-dressed but tired. Carrying a briefcase and walking toward her usual parking spot, Marcus saw the muzzle flash. Before he heard the shot, the bullet struck the concrete wall inches from Margaret's head, sending chips of debris flying. She dropped to the ground instinctively, screaming, as Marcus sprinted toward her position. "Stay down!" he shouted, drawing his own weapon as he moved. "Get behind the pillar!" The second shooter, Bravo, was positioned behind a SUV about 30 yards away, using the vehicle for cover while he tried to line up another shot. He was good, but he was also surprised. The plan had called for a clean assassination, not a firefight with an armed opponent. Marcus put 2 rounds into the SUV's engine block, not trying to hit the shooter, but forcing him to keep his head down. Then he was beside Margaret, pulling her behind the concrete pillar. "Who are you?" she gasped, staring at the gun in his hands. "Someone who's going to keep you alive," Marcus replied, scanning for the shooter's next position. "Stay behind me and do exactly what I say." The garage echoed with the sound of running footsteps. Bravo was moving, trying to flank their position. Marcus could track his movement by sound. Years of training in close-quarters combat had taught him to use all his senses. "This way," Marcus said, guiding Margaret toward the emergency stairwell. "We need to move." Another shot rang out, this one closer. The shooter had night vision or was using the muzzle flashes to track their position. Either way, staying still was a death sentence. They reached the stairwell door just as Marcus heard the distinct sound of feet on concrete behind them. Bravo was closing in, probably hoping to catch them in the stairwell where they'd have no cover. Marcus had a different plan. Instead of going through the stairwell door, Marcus guided Margaret to the side and handed her his radio. "Call for help," he whispered. "Tell them officer down, shots fired, 5th level." Then he doubled back, using the door as bait. Bravo approached. Cautiously, weapon raised, expecting to follow them into the stairwell. What he didn't expect was for Marcus to come around the pillar behind him, moving like a man 20 years younger. The fight was brief and violent. Bravo was skilled, but Marcus had spent 15 years training for exactly this scenario: close quarters combat against armed opponents. He knocked the gun from Bravo's hand with a strike to the wrist, followed up with an elbow to the solar plexus, and finished with a takedown that left the man unconscious on the concrete floor. Marcus secured Bravo's weapon and checked his pulse alive, but out of the fight. He zip-tied the man's hands and feet, then returned to Margaret, who was staring at him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "The police are coming," she said. "Who are you really?" Marcus helped her to her feet, scanning the garage for any additional threats. "Just a parking attendant who used to have a different job." "What kind of job?" Before Marcus could answer, the sound of sirens filled the air. Police cruisers and an ambulance were arriving, their emergency lights painting the concrete walls in red and blue. "The kind where I learned to protect people," Marcus said simply. Detective Lisa Rodriguez arrived 20 minutes later, by which time the scene had been secured and the 2 unconscious attackers had been taken into custody. She was a 15-year veteran of the force, experienced enough to recognize when something didn't add up. "So let me get this straight," she said to Marcus. "You're a parking attendant who happened to be armed and trained enough to take down 2 professional assassins?" Marcus sat on the hood of a police car, his hands cuffed behind his back, standard procedure until they could sort out what had happened. "I'm licensed to carry," he said, "and I served in the military." "What branch?" "Army." It was technically true, though it left out the part about the Secret Service. Detective Rodriguez studied him carefully. She'd seen enough ex-military security guards to recognize the type, but this felt different. The way this man had moved, the precision of his actions, the professional restraint he'd shown, this wasn't standard military police training. "The 2 suspects," she continued. "Any idea who they are or why they were targeting Miss Chen?" Margaret Chen, who'd been giving her own statement to another detective, looked over. "I've been prosecuting the Torino family," she said. "Organized crime. The trial starts next week." That explained the motivation, but not the execution. Detective Rodriguez had seen mob hits before. They were usually messier, more personal. This had been a professional operation, the kind that required serious money and connections. "You saved my life," Margaret said to Marcus. "Thank you." Marcus nodded but didn't elaborate. He was already thinking about the consequences of what happened. The Torino family had resources, and they wouldn't be happy that their plan had failed. There would be questions, investigations, and eventually, someone would dig deep enough to discover that Marcus Henderson was really Marcus Chen. His quiet life was over. The investigation took 3 days, during which Marcus was placed on administrative leave while the police sorted through the evidence. Detective Rodriguez was thorough, running background checks, interviewing witnesses, and trying to piece together how a parking attendant had been able to neutralize 2 armed professionals. The breakthrough came when she ran Marcus's fingerprints through the federal database. The results that came back were heavily redacted, but they told a story that made everything click into place. "Marcus Chen," she said when she called him back to the station. "Former Secret Service, Presidential Protective Division. Distinguished service record, medical discharge 5 years ago." Marcus didn't deny it. There was no point now. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rodriguez asked. "Because I wanted to leave that life behind," Marcus said. "I took a job where I could use my skills to help people without all the politics and complications. Just ... simple protection work, And the name change? Marcus was quiet for a moment. There were people who weren't happy about some of the operations I was involved in. Changing my identity was a precaution? Rodriguez nodded. She'd seen enough to know that some stories were better left untold. The Torino family is going to figure out who you are eventually. They've got connections, lawyers, people who can dig into records. I know. So, what's your plan? Marcus looked out the window of the interview room, watching normal people go about their normal lives. He'd wanted to be one of them, but some things couldn't be changed. I guess I go back to work, he said. Margaret Chun's trial proceeded as scheduled, with additional security provided by federal marshals. The Torino family's attempt to intimidate her had backfired spectacularly, bringing unwanted attention to their operations and strengthening the prosecution's case. Marcus returned to his job at the Meridian Tower parking garage, but everything had changed. Word had spread quickly through the building about what had happened. The wealthy clients who'd previously ignored him now treated him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Some offered him jobs, private security positions that paid 10 times what he was making as a parking attendant. Others simply thanked him for keeping them safe, realizing that his presence had been protecting them all along. Marcus declined the job offers and accepted the thanks graciously, but he didn't change his routine. He still arrived every night. At the same time, still walked his security patterns, still maintained his vigilant watch over the garage and its occupants. The difference was that now people knew what they were looking at when they saw him. Not just a parking attendant, but a guardian. Someone who'd spent his career protecting the most important people in the country and had chosen to continue that mission in his own quiet way. Detective Rodriguez stopped by occasionally, sometimes officially and sometimes just to check in. Any regrets? She asked one night. About what? Giving up your anonymity. Going back to being Marcus Chun instead of Marcus Henderson. Marcus considered the question as he watched a late-arriving customer park a Porsche on the second level. The man nodded respectfully as he handed over his keys, a small gesture that would have been unthinkable before. No, Marcus said finally. I spent 15 years protecting people who were supposed to be important. Turns out all people are important. They just needed someone to remind them. The story of the parking attendant who turned out to be a Secret Service agent made national news. It was the kind of human interest story that captured people's imagination, the ordinary person with an extraordinary past, the hidden hero among. U.S. Marcus declined all interview requests, but that didn't stop the media from digging into his background. Within a week, his service record had been partially declassified, revealing a career of commendations, successful protection missions, and the mysterious circumstances of his medical discharge. The attention brought both positive and negative consequences. On the positive side, several other veterans reached out, sharing their own stories of struggling to find purpose after leaving military or government service. Marcus found himself becoming an unofficial counselor, helping other former protectors find ways to use their skills in civilian life. On the negative side, the publicity attracted the wrong kind of attention. 3 weeks after the parking garage incident, Marcus noticed surveillance cameras that hadn't been there before. His apartment was broken into, though nothing was taken. His phone started receiving calls from blocked numbers. The Torino family, it seemed, had not forgotten about him. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus was at work, doing his usual security sweep of the parking garage, when his personal phone rang. The number was blocked, but he answered anyway. Marcus Chun, a voice said. It was older, gravelly, with a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. You have the wrong number, Marcus replied. Do I? The man who cost my family a very expensive operation? The man who sent 2 of my best people to federal prison? Marcus felt the familiar chill of recognition. This wasn't just any Torino family member. This was old-school organized crime, the kind that had connections reaching back decades. What do you want? Marcus asked. I want you to understand something, the voice continued. You may have been a big shot in the government, but you're not under federal protection anymore. You're just an old man working a menial job, and old men can have accidents. The line went dead. Marcus stood in the empty parking garage, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of cars, and realized that his war wasn't over. It had just entered a new phase. He could run again, change his identity once more, disappear into another anonymous job in another anonymous town. But he was tired of running, tired of hiding from who he used to be. Besides, there were people here who depended on him now. Margaret Chun, whose life he'd saved. The wealthy clients who trusted him to protect their property. The other veterans, who looked to him for guidance and inspiration. Sometimes the best place to make a stand was right where you were. Marcus made several phone calls over the next few days. The first was to Detective Rodriguez, informing her about the threat and asking for increased patrols around the garage. The second was to his former supervisor in the Secret Service, requesting information about current Torino family operations. The third call was the most important one. Margaret Chun's office, a voice answered. This is Marcus Henderson from the Meridian Tower garage. I need to speak with Miss Chun about a security matter. When Margaret came on the line, Marcus was direct. The people who tried to kill you aren't finished. They've threatened me, which means they're probably planning something else for you. The trial's over, Margaret said. We won. Torino's going to prison for the rest of his life. That's exactly why they're angry, Marcus replied. And angry. People do stupid things. They met the next day in Margaret's office, 20 floors above the parking garage where Marcus had saved her life. She was grateful but confused about why he was still protecting her. This isn't your job anymore, she said. You're a parking attendant, not a bodyguard. Marcus looked out her window at the city below, thinking about all the people who moved through it every day, unaware of the dangers that surrounded them. Maybe that's the problem, he said. Everyone thinks protection is someone else's job. But sometimes the person best qualified to keep you safe is the one you least expect. Epilogue. The Guardian remains 6 months later. Marcus was still working. The night shift at the Meridian Tower parking garage. The Torino family had made 2 more attempts to get to Margaret Chun, both of which had been thwarted by the improved security measures Marcus had recommended. Detective Rodriguez had been promoted to lieutenant, partly based on her handling of the parking garage case. She still stopped by occasionally, bringing coffee and updates on various criminal investigations. Margaret Chun had taken a new job with the federal prosecutor's office, specializing in organized crime cases. She'd also started a foundation providing security training for other prosecutors and judges who dealt with dangerous defendants. The parking garage itself had become something of a legend. Word had spread through the building and beyond about the ex-Secret Service agent who worked there, and people began requesting Marcus specifically when they needed their cars parked. Some came just to shake his hand and thank him for his service. Marcus didn't mind the attention, but he never let it distract him from his primary mission. Every night, he walked his security patterns, monitored the entrances and exits, and kept watch over the people who trusted him to keep them safe, because that's what protectors do. They don't seek recognition or a reward. They don't need thanks or praise. They simply stand watch, ready to act when the moment demands it. Content in the knowledge that their presence makes the world a little bit safer. Marcus Chun had spent 15 years protecting the most powerful people in the country. Now he spent his nights protecting anyone who needed it, one parking space at a time. And he'd never been more satisfied with his work. So I ask you now, have you ever encountered someone like Marcus? Someone who seemed ordinary but turned out to have an extraordinary past. Someone who chose to use their skills quietly without seeking recognition or reward. Share their story in the comments. Tell us about the hidden guardians you've known. Because here at the Human Stories, we believe that the most powerful protectors are often the ones we never notice until we need them most. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please share it and subscribe. Help us keep these stories alive and honor the quiet heroes who stand watch in the shadows. And remember, sometimes the person best qualified to protect you is the one you'd least expect. Respect the parking attendant, the security guard, the maintenance worker. You never know what they've done or what they're capable of. This video is a fictional dramatization created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real individuals, locations, or events is purely coincidental. This story was crafted to highlight themes of service, protection, and the hidden heroes among us through emotional storytelling.